ITP 253, Task 7, Assignment Number 2, High School Veterans Day Speech.
I'd like to thank one of your students, Ms. Matosh, for inviting me here, and to one of your faculty, your new wrestling coach, Mr. Chad Ripke, who I had the pleasure of coaching since he was in first grade. And I'd like to thank your principal, too, for allowing me to come and speak to you on Veterans Day. This is a very important day for me. And I hope that as we have a chance to talk today, that it becomes more of an important day for you, and that you realize some different things about veterans and about freedom and about yourself. I'm an old guy. I was born in 1950. That was right after World War II. And that was fresh in everyone's mind then. And I have a father that served in the Navy during World War II. He saw a lot of action from Okinawa to the Salmon Islands. And he fought in a lot of different battles. He was on the bridge of the ship when a suicide plane came over. And had he not ducked, the wheel would have taken him off right here at the midsection. He could feel the heat from the motor. And as he hit the deck, there were parts of the aircraft coming off around him. He's dodged the shells, and he manned the guns that brought the enemy down. And I grew up hearing these stories. My dad's 83, he's still alive. I'm very proud of him. And I'm very proud of his service to our country, and I'm proud of the heritage that he gave me about our country. I heard him talking on the phone to his Navy buddies. A lot of times when we took a summer vacation, it was to see them, because that's who he was close to. And I just grew up understanding that because you wore the uniform of the United States military, regardless of the branch, that you were respected by your country. People respected you because you would serve. I remember the stories he told about getting off the ship with a duffel bag on his shoulder. And he said you couldn't even go out into the streets very far before someone in the civilian sector would pick you up and take you to the train station, to the air terminal, maybe to the local restaurant and buy you a meal, or possibly even to their home and cook you a home-cooked meal and put you up for the night and then take you to your destination the next morning. And it was that kind of respect that I grew up understanding was a part of America and part of wearing the uniform. I got into high school and we started to hear something about a small Asian country called Vietnam. I'd never heard of Vietnam before. It was a small country. We were a large country. There was no war declared. It was something called a police action. So there really wasn't any reason for me to research this. There wasn't any real reason for me to get excited about it. It was just something that was happening in another part of the world, and we thought we would be in and out. But during that era, something happened that changed me, and it changed our country. And for the first time in the history of America, those that wore the uniform for the United States of America lost that respect of those in the private sector. And the uniform that was respected through World War I, World War II, the Korean War, those same uniforms were now, instead of being held in high regard, they were looked down upon. And I couldn't understand why the change And during that time, people started to burn their draft cards openly, publicly, in disrespect of our country and those in authority over us. I watched at public events, ball games, hockey games, whatever, as people would stand when they brought the colors onto the floor and leave their hats on, put their hands in their pockets, look at the floor, and not recite the Pledge of Allegiance. They openly, publicly burned our flag on the courthouse steps and at the corner of whatever city they decided. And for the first time, there were demonstrations against our country openly on the streets in front of our military installations. And it made me wonder, why? Why are the people in uniform disrespected? What have they done to deserve this? Why should they be ridiculed instead of held in that same respect and high esteem that they always were before? I can remember first 2 years of me being in the Army, riding the convoys, and just because we were in uniform, just because we cared enough to stand for our country, that people would stand openly and make obscene street gestures and comments to us. And this began to work inside of me. And it began to make me ask questions. It began to change my life. And the questions that it drew me to ask are the questions I want to ask you today. It's a series of 5 questions, and the first one was a very simple question, but one that I never had to ask before. And I had to define for the first time in my life, what is freedom? So I went to the dictionary, and I found that Webster's definition of freedom is simple. It is not being governed by an outside force. Well, that was pretty simple, because we're the greatest nation in the world. We're the most powerful nation on the globe. A nation of the people, by the people, and for the people. So of course we're free. But of the 5 questions, that was easily answered. The other questions became much harder. The second question was, if I know what freedom is, what would my life be like without it? And for the first time, I began to try and visualize what that would mean and what would it be like to be without my freedom. You know, we're here today. We come and go as we please. We wear what we want. Your parents, and you as well, say what you want about our government, about our president, our governor, and you don't give a second thought about any kind of retribution that might come from that. Well, it hasn't been too many years ago that we were in a Cold War with Russia, and we heard the stories that came out of Russia of those people that did not have freedom. And they were told where to be and when, what to wear and not, what they could and could not say, and to whom they could and could not say it. And we cannot imagine that. And I dare say there's probably not one of you here that has ever thought about what that would be like to experience what those people experienced because they did not have freedom, as the KGB, the elite force, came into their houses in the middle of the night, unannounced, uninvited, and would grab an uncle, a grandfather, a son, and drag him from that home down the stairs and never to be heard from again. We are blessed because we are free. We are blessed because we do not have to think about those kind of things. But ladies and gentlemen, that freedom does not come for free. Freedom is precious. It is bought with a precious price. First question was, what is freedom? Second question, what would your life be like without it? Third question, what is the cost of freedom? The cost of freedom, what makes it so precious is because of what it costs to buy it. There is no amount of money that will buy freedom. Good planning does not get freedom. There is no way that freedom will come in a certain amount of time. It comes with one thing. It comes with human life. It comes with the loss of human blood. And our media tells us, all they tell us about Iraq is how many bodies we've lost. But ladies and gentlemen, what would happen if no one went? What would happen if they attack our country and they kill 3,000 of our people and no one retaliated? What would happen if no one stood up and said, no, we will not accept this? It's great for the media to say you are wrong, but what if no one did it? It paints a very, very different picture of what flag might be flying over our country today because of World War I and World War II. But because there are people that are willing to put their lives on the line for your freedom and mine and give the ultimate price. That's why we have freedom today. That's why we can be here. That is the cost of freedom. So the fourth question I ask you is, who pays that price? If freedom is so costly and can only be purchased with human blood, who pays it? Today we are here to remember the veterans. Ladies and gentlemen, that is who pays it. I would challenge each one of you, in remembrance of Veterans Day, that you take the time and you seek out someone that wears the uniform today or someone that has worn the uniform in the past, and you shake their hand. Give them a hug. And maybe they'll tell you the story of a loss of a brother or a son or an uncle. That was part of the purchase for your freedom and mine. There's a book entitled Return to Freedom that was written by Lieutenant Colonel Sam Braccio, who was a graduate of Gonzaga University right here in Spokane. He was a pilot in World War II, and he was shot down over the Philippine Islands. And he was a prisoner of war on the island of Mindanao. And his book gives a very detailed account of what those people went through. I grew up hearing what the prisoners of war went through. You know, we hear the stories of what happened in Abu Ghraib, and no one is happy about that, but ladies and gentlemen, that was nothing compared to what's happened in the past to our soldiers, to the best of our forces. My dad told me the stories of our prisoners of war, those that were captured, our Americans, the best of the best, that the enemy would sharpen bamboo wedges and drive it between the nails and the flesh of their fingers. They would strap them by their thumbs from wires so their toes could barely touch the floor and leave them there for hours. They would sharpen a piece of bamboo and bury it in the ground and strap one of our people over it. Over a short period of time, the bamboo would grow through them. You say, hey man, don't be grossing me out. This is hard. Yes, it is. How could I possibly tell you about the price of freedom? How can I tell you what it costs if I don't tell you the truth about who paid it and what they paid? I will not water down the price of freedom, because that's what makes you understand why it's so valuable to you and to me. Colonel Sam Gracio told a story of the Bataan Death March, and if you have not heard of that, you need to go to the history books and find out the thousands of American prisoners of war that marched across the Philippines in plus 100-degree heat. They were malnutritioned, emaciated, they were dehydrated, they were abused, and yet they were our best. And he told a story that so moves me that I will tell you. During the Bataan Death March, as they marched the length of these islands, one of our young men that had put himself in a position to say, I will stand for your freedom, I will stand for the nation, had reached a point that he could no longer go on. He was at death's door, and because of this condition of weakness, fell out alongside. And one of the guards reached into the line and grabbed one of his fellow comrades, one of his fellow soldiers, another of the best of America, and pulled him out of line, and from somewhere produced a shovel and handed him this shovel. And then he took his bayonet and put it in this young man's throat and commanded him to dig the grave for this fallen soldier. And although he was not dead, he forced his buddy to dig this grave. And when the guard decided that the hole was deep enough, he took this fallen comrade and kicked his body into this grave, and with an increased pressure on the neck of his buddy, commanded him to cover him over even though he still lived. And one shovelful after another, his buddy was forced to cover his fellow soldier, his comrade. But the fight for life is the most strong thing that we have. And this man forced his head above that dirt for one last breath to sustain his life. And the guard increased the pressure of the bayonet on his buddy's neck and forced him to take that shovel and beat his buddy unconscious, and then finish the job of covering him up to suffocate. You say that is brutal and that is inhuman. And yes, it is, and that is the truth. And that is one amongst million atrocities that happened to our people in uniform to buy freedom for you and for me. Because they knew you, because they knew me, not a chance. Because they were going to get to enjoy the freedom that they died for? No. Why? Because freedom was precious to them, and they understood how important it was to pass on that freedom to you and to our nation. And they were willing to do that. What is freedom? What would your life be like without it? What is the cost of freedom? Who pays for it? And the final question, and the most important of all, is what have you done to deserve that? And I ask the same of myself. And I have to say, precious little. I have not done anything in my life that I deserve that someone should have a wedge of bamboo shoved between the nail and the flesh of their fingers. Nor have I done anything to deserve that someone should be buried alive so that I can have freedom. Have you? It is Veterans Day. This is not to give you a day off of school. This is a day that each one of you, as it comes around on an annual basis, should be thinking about what would happen in your life and where would you be if there were no veterans. Ladies and gentlemen, you are not that far away from making these decisions. You are the future of our country. And at some point you must ask yourself that the freedom that you live in, the freedom that you've been born into in the greatest nation in the world, the freedom that you live in today, what's it worth to you? If you are called upon to pass that freedom on to the next generation, where will you be? What stand will you take? Will you put your life on the line to give someone else the freedom that you have? I leave that challenge with you on Veterans Day, and I will hope and pray that from the time that you and I have got to spend together today, that never again is Veterans Day the same for you, and never again will your life be the same when you think about freedom and when you see the colors of the United States of America fly. I am honored to be here. I thank you for listening. And to each one of you, I say God bless you and God bless America. Thank you.